Imagine this. You open your eyes, but there's nothing but suffocating blackness. Your chest heaves, but the air feels thick, stale, like it's running out. You reach out, and your fingers scrape against rough wood, splintered and unyielding, inches from your face. Panic claws at your throat as you realize you're in a coffin, 6 feet under, buried alive. But this isn't some modern horror flick. This is the Middle Ages, a time when medicine was guesswork and death was often a mistake. How did you end up here? Were you poisoned, misdiagnosed, or betrayed? And here's the kicker. What if you could claw your way out, only to face a world that thinks you're a demon risen from Thelema? In the next few minutes, we're diving into the bone-chilling reality of being buried alive in the 14th century. What would you feel? What would you do? And could you survive? Not just the grave, but the medieval world waiting above. Stay with me, because this nightmare is about to get very, very real. The medieval mindset. Why were people buried alive? Let's rewind. How did you end up in that coffin? The Middle Ages weren't exactly a golden age for medical science. Imagine you're a peasant in 1347, struck by fever during the Black Death. Your family sees your shallow breathing, your clammy skin, and assumes you're gone. Or maybe you're a noble, slipped to poison by a rival, your pulse so faint the local physician declares you dead. Back then, doctors didn't check for brain activity or use stethoscopes. They barely understood the heart. Catalepsy, a condition that mimics death with rigid limbs and slowed vitals, was a silent killer. 1 minute, you're unconscious. The next, you're nailed into a box. But here's the twist. What if you weren't sick at all? What if your enemies staged this to get rid of you? In a world obsessed with sin and salvation, being buried alive wasn't just a mistake. It could be a murder plot. And the scariest part, it happened more often than you'd think. Historical records mention revenants, people who returned from the grave. Were they undead monsters or just unlucky souls who woke up too late? Stick around, because we're about to feel the weight of that dirt piling on. Inside the coffin, the fight for survival. You're awake now, trapped in that coffin. The darkness presses in, and every sound, your ragged breathing, the creak of wood, the faint trickle of dirt, feels like a countdown. Your heart pounds, but each breath pulls in less air. The coffin's walls are so close you can't sit up, can't turn. Splinters tear at your skin as you claw at the lid, but it's nailed shut, and the earth above is heavy. What do? Do you scream, wasting precious oxygen, or stay calm and ration your air? In the Middle Ages, coffins were crude, often just pine boxes, sometimes not even sealed tightly. If you're lucky, a gap lets in a trickle of air, but luck is fleeting. You've got maybe a few hours before the air runs out, less if you panic. And here's the gut punch. What if you break through, only to find the weight of 6 feet of dirt crushing you? Some historical accounts tell of scratches found inside exhumed coffins, proof of desperate struggles. Imagine the terror of knowing you're so close to freedom, yet so far. Would you keep fighting, or accept your fate? Let's find out what happens if you escape, or if the grave wins. The escape, breaking free, but at what cost? Against all odds, you've done it. With bleeding hands and fading strength, you've splintered the coffin lid. Dirt pours in, choking your lungs, but you dig upward, clawing through the earth. Your fingers break through to the surface, and you gulp fresh air under a starry sky. You're alive, but are you safe? It's 1347, and you've just crawled out of your own grave. Your village thinks you're dead. Worse, the medieval mind saw the dead returning as a sign of the devil. What if your family screams in terror, thinking you're a revenant? Or what if the local priest calls for your burning as a heretic? You're covered in dirt, weak from oxygen deprivation, and maybe injured from the escape? Do you run to your loved ones, risking their fear, or hide in the shadows, a ghost in your own life? And here's the cruel twist. What if your enemies, the ones who buried you, are still out there, watching? Survival isn't just about escaping the grave. It's about surviving the world you've returned to. Let's explore what happens when the living fear the dead. The aftermath. A world that fears you. You've escaped the grave, but the nightmare's far from over. Picture this. You stumble into your village, desperate for help. Your wife sees you and screams, clutching a cross. Your children flee, thinking you're a demon. The Middle Ages were steeped in superstition. Corpses didn't just come back. To them, you're either a miracle or a curse. The local priest might lock you in a church for an exorcism, or worse, tie you to a stake. But what if you convince them you're human? You're still not safe. If you were buried on purpose, your enemies are out there, and now they know you're alive. Do you seek revenge, risking everything, or disappear into the wilderness, leaving your old life behind? And here's the darkest question. What if you start to doubt yourself? After hours in that coffin, clawing through dirt, what if you wonder if you really did die, and something else came back? Historical records mention burial survivors, shunned or killed, their stories erased. Being buried alive wasn't just a physical horror, it was a social death sentence. As we wrap up, ask yourself, could you rebuild a life when the world sees you as a ghost? Closing, the legacy of fear. Being buried alive in the Middle Ages wasn't just a rare accident, it was a chilling reality that shaped history. The fear of waking in a grave led to safety coffins centuries later, with bells and tubes for the dead to signal they were alive. But back then, you were at the mercy of superstition, betrayal, and a world that didn't understand death. So, what's the takeaway? The next time you feel trapped, whether by a job, a relationship, or your own mind, remember the strength it took to claw out of that coffin and ask yourself, what would you do if the world turned against you? Would you fight to prove you're alive, or fade into the shadows? This is more than a medieval horror story. It's a reminder of human resilience and the lengths we'll go to survive. If this journey shook you, hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good scare, and let me know in the comments. Could you survive being buried alive? Until next time, keep your eyes open, because you never know when the ground might shift beneath you.